The events of 2020 will probably go on to define the 21st century. We dealt with the worst pandemic in 100 years. Police and protesters clashed across the United States. Wildfires raged, all in the middle of an election year. More than 2.5 million people have died from the novel coronavirus. However, throughout all the tragedies and chaos, we also saw the good in humanity. We saw people band together to help one another. We saw the fight for civil rights manifest across the world. We took time to appreciate essential workers who often don't get thanked enough. 2020 was a lot, and that's what this documentary will attempt to capture. But first, we have to start from the beginning. Before the beginning. In 2013, three African American women, Alicia Garza, Patrice Colors, and Opal Tometi, started the hashtag Black Lives Matter movement in protest of police brutality against African Americans. The next year, two African American men, Michael Brown and Eric Garner, were murdered by police, and their deaths were followed by massive protests across the United States. Following those events, the Black Lives Matter movement would go on to gain national attention. Fast forward 2 years, and the billionaire co founder of Microsoft gave a TED talk that was called The Next Outbreak? We're Not Ready for It. He gave his talk during the midst of the Ebola crisis. In his talk, he warned that the next epidemic could be far worse. He said that there was potential for an airborne virus that could easily spread from person to person. Now, it's worth mentioning that the talk referenced a future epidemic, not a global outbreak. But needless to say, a virus that fit that description would emerge a few years later with far more catastrophic consequences. The next year, Trump was nominated for president by the Republican Party, absolutely destroying his primary opponent. His candidacy was incredibly controversial, and many Republicans didn't support him. He ran on a platform of tighter border security, isolationism, and ridding Washington of corruption. And while on the campaign trail, he came under fire for comments that many alleged as racist, misogynistic, and nationalistic. Despite these allegations, Mr. Trump won a very close election and became the 45th President of the United States in one of the most polarized elections in American history. His election divided the Republican Party into factions, pro Trump and anti Trump. In 2018, the National Security Advisor John Bolton disbanded the NSC's Pandemic Response Unit. And while many claimed he fired all personnel on the team, in fact, many members were reassigned to other units in the NSC. Despite that fact, the disbanding of a unit remains an iconic symbol of how unprepared the world was for a pandemic. All of these factors would eventually clash at the turn of the decade, leading to the most chaotic year of the 21st century. December 2019. The local government in Wuhan, China confirmed that dozens of people had been diagnosed with pneumonia with an unknown cause. And this is where the story of 2020 begins.